In this video we'll talk about financial issues associated with the sales activity. Financial performance management is a key aspect of sales management. We'll see that the two are intricately linked, and that the, if you like, productivity of the sales team, the success of the sales team manifests itself in terms of the prosperity and the resources that the business can command. A successful sales team, therefore, is very important to an organization. But we'll run through some of these issues in the course of this video. Financial management enables the sales team to measure progress, performance, and benchmarking. So the sales team will have its own budget, and the budget will enable it to draw comparisons between its activities both in the current time period and in the previous time periods, to see what its expenditures are, how it's growing or how it's developing, and also to benchmark against perhaps other organizations to see how much has been spent there. That information may of course not be readily accessible, but estimates can be made about the number involved in the number of salespeople, I should say, involved in other organizations. So financial management is a very important issue when looking at the sales function. But on a more macro level, the sales activity, of course, is of crucial importance to the organization and for the stability and viability of the organization. Performance management provides financial information to assist in performance and assess the sales team potential to meet goals. So financial management provides information, financial information, which will help the team in its performance and assess the success or failure of the team in meeting its objectives. So the team will be allocated a budget. What is, in a sense, the return on that budget? What's the return to the company on that budget? Is it a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, or what is it? How much does the sales team bring back to the company, given the company has allocated a budget to the sales activity? What's the return on that investment? Financial performance management allows the sales team to benchmark against the following: forecasts and targets such as sales volume and profitability. So the team may look at previous year's performance in terms of sales volume and profitability, even in terms of the prices charged in previous years. That's assuming, of course, that the same product has been produced over the years. Then it may, based on that and based on a trend, may be able to estimate what its likely expenditure will be in the current time period. It may be able to estimate what targets are realistic given what has been happening in the past. If it's an entirely new product or a new company who's making this product, of course this information may not be available, in which case they may have to make guesses based on, say, what competitors are doing and the numbers involved in the competitor organizations and the size of the other organizations in relationship to the sales staff. But it's not an easy calculation to do, and sometimes it's based on assumptions, and the assumptions would have to be vetted for their realism. National sales standards of similar products in the market. Well, if those figures are known, that the combined industry for this particular product are making between them a certain amount and that the trend is upwards or downwards, if that can be estimated, and if those figures can be picked up from some source, perhaps the chambers of commerce, or from some source, some secondary source. If that is the case, then the company can make more informed estimates about its costs and its budgets and what's likely to happen in the coming time period. Competitor activities and performances are also important, and looking at the performance of the organization, to say it is good or bad is a relative term. It must be compared to what the competitors are achieving. So if the competitors are expanding and prospering in the market, then the market should be buoyant, and the chances are the company will do well. If the competitors are struggling, it may not look good for the company in the medium term or even in the long term. So looking at competitors' activities and performances can flag up issues that the company may want to take on board. Market sector and the share of each product. Well, if the company is marketing several products, there's a portfolio of products, then some of them may be doing very well, some may not be doing well at all. And the sales activity should be carefully considered in the context of that variation in the portfolio. It may be that the sales team will need to work more on the failing projects. But some informed decision and some element of entrepreneurship may be required in trying to assess where the efforts are best spent. Are the efforts best spent with the most successful products to try and further achieve market share with those products and to further stabilize and enhance those products, or go back to the failing products and try to revive them? So there are management issues there, decisions to be made, which are not easily solved. Now, financial performance management allows the sales team to benchmark against the following, as I said, against the product distribution amongst different customer base. Customers will have varying requirements in the marketplace. Not all customers want the same. So looking at the range of products that the company makes, trying to work out which segment of the market are most appropriate to target is an issue. The company has to try to work out where it spends its resources most effectively. And to do that, as I said in the previous slide, it will need information, but it will also need informed guesswork to try and maximize the return from this limited resource that the sales team have got. Effectiveness of distributors within the market and sales volume. Sometimes the companies can partially offload the burden of marketing onto distributors. For example, if the company is making products which will eventually be sold on to households, then they may want to use warehouses or wholesalers, in which case the wholesaler will try to market the products also. So it's a combined effort on the part of the company and the wholesalers. The wholesalers will buy the products in anticipation of selling the products on to the retailers. But to do that, they will perhaps need to market the products with the retailers. And the retailers will need to market the products with the customers. So the company has, in a sense, outsourced some of the marketing expenditure to the distributors and to the retailers. And that's a good tactic, except the wholesalers and the retailers will be reluctant to spend a lot of their time and energy in marketing a product which is perhaps failing and the customers don't want. What will happen in that case is the wholesalers and the retailers will simply cease to stock the product, and in that case the product has completely failed. The level of sales increase with individual customers and segments. It's possible to work out the financial performance of management looking at what's happening with sales and whether sales are increasing or decreasing. And it's possible to break that down to look at whether they're increasing or decreasing in the context of individual consumers or looking at segments and seeing if the product is being well received within a particular segment of the market, within a particular age profile or a particular gender or people of a certain education level or whatever it is. So looking at the segment, looking at the performance of the product within that segment is an indicator of the success or failure of management in allocating budgets and expenditures in that particular way. The effectiveness of sales promotions and incentives. Companies sometimes have promotions. They give away free samples, or they give two for the price of one, or they reduce the price for a limited period, or have various promotions. Now, have those been successful in terms of acquiring customers and retaining the customers when those incentives have been removed? And to what extent can the company build up a loyalty amongst the customers? So that's another way of attempting to benchmark the success or failure of management in this context. And looking at the feedback and response from advertising. It could be that the feedback and response from advertising is based on a like or dislike of the advertising itself, not so much of the product. Simply they don't like the music or they don't like the advertisement, they find it annoying. In which case the whole process of advertising, let's say on television, with an annoying advertisement can alienate customers. It goes exactly in the wrong way. So it's very important that any expenditure on this type of activity is carefully thought out in advance, and there's a good case for using focus groups and using feedback from market research to see if the advertisement or the proposed advertisement would be acceptable, if it would promote the image of the business or would be counterproductive. Noonan in 1998, the diagram explains the different types of information activities a sales manager may want to measure. And we'll have a look at this diagram in a few moments, but it's a way of attempting to explain the different types of information and activities a sales manager may want to investigate. The diagram shows a range of different performance indicators a sales manager can use. So let's look at the diagram. First of all, we start with what we want to measure. Now, measures the actual figures and percentage changes of each of the following that is relevant to the business. So it measures actual figures and percentage change for each of the following: company sales and industry sales. So that's what's needed to be measured, the company sales, and look at that as a proportion of the industry sales. What percentage of industry sales does the company account for? The byproduct variant of the company sales is the pack, unit size, etc., In other words, looking at the product, looking at the way it's delivered, looking at the attributes of the packaging, and looking at how the company sales came about. So that comes off the number of sales. If sales are increasing, then the company is getting something right. It maybe the product is right, but also the packaging, the delivery, the promotions, they're right. And it's difficult for the business to try and separate out what exactly is causing the increase in sales. And of course, we could talk about this in reverse and talk about decline in sales and what exactly is it that's causing the customers to turn against the product. Is it the price? Is it the quality? Is it the image? Is it the reputation of the business? What is it exactly? So we could look at the company sales by product. How many products have been sold? And let's move away from the financial part for a moment and just look at the number of products sold and use that as a comparison against the total number of products put into the market by the industry to give an indication of the company size. It could be, of course, that if we want to do this in financial terms, we'll talk about the number of products sold times the price and look at the industry financial sales as well and work out the proportions that way. You might want to look ahead by product category. Sometimes companies sell different products and they belong to different categories, so they might want to separate out and say this product belongs to a particular category and these other products belong to other categories, and so there's a more refined measure looking at the company sales, and the company would want to measure that. And all of this, of course, leads us to total sales, and the total sales for each company, when it's added together, will be the industry sales. But for an individual company, the total sales can be worked out as a proportion of the industry sales, which will tell the company how well it's doing. What percentage of the market does it account for? Which is an indication of how well it's doing vis-a-vis its competitors. Each proportion of the total market held by each company, those proportions must add up to 100%. So if an individual company is selling 25% and following year it's selling 30%, then it has increased its market share. That means its competitors have lost market share. So it's a way of measuring its effectiveness in the market. Could do it by customers, of course. Could look at the number of customers that the company's got. It could be by trade channel. Sometimes products are supplied to different trades, different usage for the product. So you could look at the number of trades that are involved. Depends on the nature of the product that the company is producing. It could be a consumer product, it could be a secondary product going into production someplace else. It could be tools for the DIY market. So it depends. And we could look at it by market sector. Which sector of the market is it aimed at? Is it aimed at the home market? As I said earlier, the DIY market. Is it aimed at, let's say, small companies or medium-sized companies, or is it looking at engineering companies only, or what exactly is the sector they're looking at? But again, there's a total industry sale figure and there's the company sales figure, and by trying to break it up in this way, the company is getting some metric as to how it's performing. As to whether they should spend a lot of time and effort in trying to do this, of course, is debatable. Maybe it's better for them to get summary figures and simply put all their energy into improving the product and giving a better customer satisfaction and giving a better image in the marketplace as an efficient company making a good product at a reasonable price, instead of collecting data and trying to analyze what needs to be done. Some data collection is certainly important, but companies can overdo it. Looking at the volume of sales, just the total volume, and you could do it by value if you wanted to, and again that can be compared with the industry figure. The volume of course can be done monthly or weekly, which will give some sort of element of seasonality in the sales. And there may be elements of seasonality that are important. Coming up to the Christmas period, certain products will sell more than others. Coming up to the summertime, outdoor products, gardening products will sell more than coming up to the winter. So that could be picked up by monthly data. And this could be cumulatively year to year. So it looks at the variations over a longer period. And it could be moving annual totals, moving averages, for example, that would indicate when sales are likely to take place. So the companies may step up production in advance and have the stock waiting for the customers when that period comes. But overall, the objective is to try to work out the market share, to see how well the company is doing vis-a-vis its competitors. Now the diagram looks into monitoring and comparing a company's progress against itself, such as performance over previous years. So the company may look at its own performance over the years and see how well it's doing today. Has it grown or is it in decline? What resources does the company currently command, and what are its objectives in terms of investment and product development and so on. So the diagram can give an indication of how well it's doing. And it's important to pick up this data. As to whether it should pick up a lot of data and pick it up from different sources and spend a lot of resource itself in trying to get the data and analyzing it, that's questionable for some companies. But some analysis is good. And in this case, looking at the performance of the company over previous years may be an indicator of how well it's doing in the current period. So we're able to look at a trend, and the company should therefore, looking at where the trend is predicting, the company knows that that's its target for the current year. The diagram also looks at how a company's performance can be benchmarked against the performance of the industry sector. And that's useful to find out what the industry is up to and how it's growing or declining, and looking at the performance of the company, as I said earlier, vis-a-vis the industry itself. There are issues about the availability of the data and the reliability of the data to make these estimates, but the company does like to know how well it's doing compared to its competitors. What market share does it hold, and is that increasing or declining? Because that's an indicator of how well it's doing in the marketplace. An organization's performance must always be benchmarked against industry and external data to overview the progress it's making. So always try to benchmark against the others to see how well the company is doing. Although it may be difficult to get detailed figures, because companies don't surrender their secrets willingly. And it's not advisable to engage in espionage and illegal or nefarious methods on picking up information. But simply by inspecting the investment the companies are undertaking and the premises and how well they seem to be doing, some indication can be worked out as to how well they've performed in the last year or whatever, the last couple of years. Companies like to think that they're growing vis-a-vis their competitors, and they're getting it right. In other words, their pricing policy, their product design, their aftercare service, all of these are working well, and the company is secure in what it's doing and has got robust plans for investment and development. But it will only have those if it feels that it's on the right track, and being on the right track means it's looking at its competitors and comparing itself to them. The Noonan diagram provides an example for measuring a company's performance based on their exporting potential as well. We live in a globalized world, and companies, when they make products, they may want to export the product, or indeed they may want to set up plants overseas and in that way capture larger markets. But looking at the performance of the business compared to the industry is an indicator of how well the company is doing and how successful they're likely to be in any adventure into another economy and setting up a plant elsewhere. Each category of the diagram will be measured against the company and industry performance, market by market, on a market by market basis. So if the company makes several products, each one should be compared against its rivals in the market. As I said, it's very difficult to get data from other companies so that very precise measurements can be made, but through market research it may be possible to interview customers and ask them which brand they prefer and how many they buy per week or per month or whatever, and in this way gauge roughly how the company is doing in comparison to its competitors. A company's sales compared with national export sales for each product. It may be possible to find out what companies who are exporting their product are, how successful they are. It may be possible to get that information through chambers of commerce or through government statistics. It'll be dated information, of course, because all secondary information is dated. But some indication may be picked up from in this way. And that would be, again, valuable information as to whether the company should embark on some sort of export drive to try and boost its sales. Current market share owned by the company and the total share of the industry. So look at the try to work out what the total sales of this product are in the market, and perhaps even include the export market, and then work out what the sales of the company is. And it could be done by product, or it could be done by value. It can be done in a range of ways, and then work out what the share of the market is and how that share of the market is varying. If the share of the market is declining, of course, it means the company is in decline and the company is in a bad place. If the share of the market is improving or holding constant, at least it's not losing out. It's still in there with a chance. But ideally, of course, the company would like to be market leader. Now, analysis of sales performance. Now, refer back to the diagram we had earlier and make a note, in fact, of that diagram on a separate piece of paper, and then pursue the video here. But the analysis of sales performance. Well, sales performance can be measured against the following targets. The company sales performance against industry, national total sales of product categories. So it's possible to envisage some sort of measurement of the company's sales against national total sales to see what the percentages are, to see what the performance is. Getting the national figures may be a problem. As I said, you have to wait for the figures to be published by the statistics office or the chambers of commerce or whoever supplies the figures. So there may be a lag in being able to use these figures, but at least some sort of trend can be worked out over a longer period as to how well the company is doing. Sales figures can be compared with volume, value and percentage shares for each product category. The percentage shares most useful probably because the one figure simply shows what the market share of that company is. If it shows that the company is selling 30% of the products in the market, the company knows it's got 30% share of the market. But it could be simply reported as the volume of goods sold. So many thousand items have been sold, whereas last year a different number was sold, and it could be based on volume in that way. It could be based on value, the value of the items sold this year compared to previous years. And the advantage of the value is it picks up the volume and the price of the product, and prices do tend to change over time. But the most useful one probably would be the percentage share of the market, because this is a direct comparison with the competitors. A company's total share of the market sales compared to share of each market sector. So look at the total share of market sales and compare it with the share of each market sector. So when we think of a product, we think of the product being in different sectors. We think of it as it's a product perhaps which can work in various ways. For example, the car industry. We think of different types of cars, and some of them move into vans or even into small lorries, and it's all part of the automotive industry. So look at the total sales one of the companies has, but you need to look at in comparison to the particular sectors. So the output of one car company that also makes, let's say, small lorries, then it's the small lorry section, that sector, that should be compared with the small lorry sectors of the other producers, and the car output compared with the others. And the car output itself is not homogeneous. There are different sizes of cars produced, and some are luxury and some are basic and so on. So you need to look at the market sectors as to where the comparisons are drawn, and it's important to compare like with like. So looking at market shares does mean looking at the different sectors. Sales can be measured month by month in volumes and value of products. It's difficult to work out percentage shares of the market on a monthly basis. The figures simply are not available that quickly. So it's more likely to be the case that they can look at the volume that they are selling on a monthly basis and look at what the trend of their sales are, and compare sales this year perhaps with the same time in the previous year. Albeit, of course, the products have changed. The products have been innovated in the meantime, but it helps in decision making. It's not entirely reliable because the products have changed, but it may be better than nothing. Although some commentators, some economists would argue that it might actually be dangerous to make these comparisons. Sales data can be compared on a weekly, monthly or annual basis, sector by sector or product category by product category. All of the qualifications I mentioned earlier apply here. The information may be out of date, it may be inaccurate, it's difficult to get information from competitors. There are so many qualifications to what I'm saying. So companies tend to rely on their own information and make comparisons with their previous performances. And again, as I just said on the previous point, it does mean that they're making an assumption that their own output is the same one time period to the next, which of course it's not. They have improved the products, they have added to the product, they have redesigned it, and so it's not exactly the same product. We can't say that a motor car today is the same as a motor car 20 years ago. They are vastly different. So the analysis of sales performance, again related back to the diagram we had earlier in this video. The importance of monitoring sales performance. Well, measurement of performance, I should say, in comparison, forecast, targets, and budgets. It's important to try to estimate how well the company is doing, so the company can take remedial action if something is going wrong. And it flags up the importance of taking that action if clearly there are issues that the figures are suggesting. So look at the budgets, look at the forecasts, and try to work out what needs to be done. Monitoring sales performance is also useful in identifying trends and data analysis. So try to work out the trends in the market. Try to work out what the customers want or the way they see the overall market. Look at what competitors are doing, and look at international markets and see what's happening there as well. Don't just confine it to the domestic markets. And see what trends are occurring in the market and try to explain the trends. Try to understand the trends. Why is the trend upwards or downwards? What's causing it? Information can be used for the planning process. It may be somewhat speculative, but it may be an indicator in terms of the planning process. It's an insight, and if it's reliable, it may be used. If it's subject to a lot of assumptions and missing data and perhaps data which is out of date or too old to be used effectively, then the planning process may not want it. It may be better to leave it out and to rely on focus groups and current market research to try and pick up the information that they need to make decisions. Provides a warning signals to take early corrective action. So analysis of sales performance is important to flag up something which may be going wrong. Clearly, if there's a big dip in sales, ignoring what's happening amongst the competitors or in the national market, if there's a big dip in sales, then it's important that the company tries to explain what caused the dip, and if need be, take remedial action, take corrective action to try and stop the dip becoming a real problem. So analysis of sales is a good idea for that reason. Simply just looking at the crude sales figure month on month to see if it's holding up and what can be expected. Assist in performance monitoring of sales team and identify any training needs. It may be that if the sales performance is falling, the sales team simply need to be updated. They need retraining, or they need their requirements need to be looked into, and if there are some issues that need to be corrected, then the company can take that action. It may be, for example, that the sales team are not completely familiar with the technology involved in the product, and therefore are not able to effectively make sales and close deals. It could be that the sales team feel they're not being rewarded sufficiently, and there's a lack of incentives for them to go looking for customers. So again, possible explanation as to why sales may dip. Now, the market share analysis. Well, market share analysis refers to a company's share of the total sales against the market. So look at the total number of sales the company makes and look at what the market is in total and see what percentage of the market it's taking. Now, again, assumptions are being made here because the competitors will make products which will be slightly different to the company. So we're not comparing like with like. Some products will have more functionality than others. Some will be a different design. Some companies will make products and then give extended warranties. So it's a very tricky business trying to make this direct comparison. And yet the company needs to know what share of the market it holds. This information provides a comparison of a company's market share against other suppliers. So it's important to try and get it, but bearing in mind it is subject to criticism and it does have errors inherent in the figures. Errors in the sense that they're not comparing the same product right across. So they may be looking at a product category as opposed to specific products. They may have to say, we are looking at cars, and then do not get caught up in the functionality of the cars or the types of engines or whatever, just simply looking at cars, car sales. And that way companies can say they hold a certain share of the car market. But within that you might find other companies hold the lead in particular types of car. So it needs careful thought before market share analysis is conducted. Market share can be compared with the trade channel sector, market segments and customer groups. So it's possible to try to compare the market share with what the trade consider to be accurate figures and what they consider to be the total output, or looking at market segments, looking at for example, back to the car industry, the business use of cars compared to domestic, then looking at sports cars and looking at cars for older people and electric cars versus fuel-based cars, and looking at all the different types and trying to work out what share of the market the company holds. But as I said many times so far in this talk, these are all very complex calculations. Now, sales activity. Well, sales activity involves the measurement of all sales transactions within an organization. So that's all the sales activity is. It's measuring the amount of sales. Now, this can be measured on a customer by customer basis, continuous regular supplies to customers. So looking at the number of sales on a customer by customer basis, how many are the customers taking? Or shipment by shipment basis, irregular supplies to customers, one-off market supplies. Sometimes customers, don't buy on a regular basis. They may only buy at certain times of the year. And foreign markets may not want to have regular supplies. They may want to have a shipment. Shipment is more economic, and they know when it's going to arrive, and they can prepare for warehousing and holding it and distribution from there. Sometimes, going back to number one, customers buy the product and they buy it on a regular basis. So sales activity can be worked out by shipment, bulk shipment, not continuous supply, or it could be continuous supply customer by customer. The following are some sales activity a sales manager can measure. The average customer order size by volume or value. So look at the number of sales and what is the volume of the sales. How many items were sold in that particular sale. Look at the average cost of order completion, distribution, production, packaging costs. Now that could be worked out internally. A good cost and management accountant would be able to work that out almost quite easily, looking at the number of items produced, the administration cost associated with it, the distribution, the production, packaging, and working out an average cost of production. And looking at the most profitable products or orders, find out which ones are the most profitable. Again, that should be available, that information should be available within the business. They know what the items are selling for, they know what their costs are, so they should be able to work out the profitability of a particular order. Now the salesperson performance, well, salespeople must be continuously monitored to ensure that they provide the most efficient service to customers. Performance monitoring includes a salesperson's potential contribution to the total company sales. So look at the salesperson and what they're contributing towards the overall sales of the business, what they're contributing towards product and brand performance, not just the total sales of the business, but looking at individual products and brands and what their contribution to sales are for those products and brands. And looking at the trade sector to see what sales they can make to that particular sector. Not just the consumer sector, but also recognizing that there are other sectors, the trade sector, building sector, and so on, engineering sectors, looking at the various sectors and seeing if they can make sales to those. And management, of course, of key accounts. Some customers are very important and their accounts must be carefully managed and nurtured to make sure that there are repeated sales to those accounts. So salesperson performance can also be measured and monitored. So what we've discussed in this video is a lot of the backdrop to sales, to find out how to measure the effectiveness of sales campaigns. And what we've seen is that the data is, generally speaking, very complex, very, very tricky data to handle, to pick up and to handle. A lot of the data may be out of date, it may be secondary data, and comparisons with other companies are particularly difficult because the other companies are going to keep their information secretive. They're going to keep it away from public scrutiny. So making estimates of market share and looking at performance indicators, that's all going to be very complex. And what tends to happen is the companies make the most of what they've got, and then they insert their experience on top of the figures to interpret the figures that they've actually got, and look at the criticisms of the figures openly. so that they've got some indication of the usefulness of the figures, and they've got some indication of how they need to improve their monitoring process and their information or data collection processes to ensure that they're able to use the figures more effectively into the future. But as I said, it's the case that they're normally confined to their own data. That's the one that's more readily available. So what they will tend to do is look at their own performance against their previous performances, as opposed to looking at their performance against their competitors or against the industry trends. So that's the nature of the problem facing looking at financial performance in the context of the sales management team. That's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that. A complicated class, but one which has to be addressed and looked into nonetheless. So let's leave it at that. That's the source we mentioned throughout the slides, and that concludes the class. So thank you for watching.